is Alex, and I never imagined that a quiet evening stroll past the old cemetery would unravel the fabric of my reality. I used to walk home from work every night, passing by Hollow Grave Cemetery, a relic from a time when the town was small and life moved slowly. The cemetery was unremarkable. Rows of weathered headstones, a few overgrown trees, and the occasional rustle of wind against cold marble. But one night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a deep, unsettling gray, I sensed something was terribly wrong. It began with a subtle dissonance in the air, a barely audible whisper that seemed to seep out from the very ground beneath my feet. I dismissed it at first as nothing more than a trick of the wind rustling through brittle autumn leaves, yet the sound grew in persistence as days passed. Each evening, as I neared the cemetery's iron gate, the whisper would intensify ever so slightly, leaving me with a chilling sense of unease. I remember pausing, heart thumping, trying to decipher a word or a phrase, but all I could make out was a forlorn murmur, as if the dead were trying to speak to me. Curiosity warred with terror, and over the following week I found myself inexplicably drawn back to hollow graves. I began spending my evenings lingering by the rusted gate, each night listening to that eerie whisper. I noticed strange coincidences. The murmur sometimes seemed to mimic snippets of conversation, echoing words I had just spoken. Even in the solitude of my small apartment, I would catch fleeting echoes that vanished as quickly as they arrived. My rational mind tried to dismiss these events, but the sensation of being watched was impossible to ignore. One particularly cold and foggy night, I resolved to confront the unsettling phenomenon. Driven by equal parts dread and determination, I entered the cemetery with nothing but a small flashlight and my racing thoughts. As I stepped over the broken threshold of the iron gate, the whispers seemed to multiply, surrounding me in a chorus of sorrowful voices. Every step forward felt heavy, as if the very ground was urging me to turn back, but I pressed on, compelled by an inexplicable need for answers. As I ventured deeper into the labyrinth of tombstones and crumbling mausoleums, the voices grew in urgency. I found myself standing before a particularly neglected mausoleum, its stone walls marred by time and neglect. In the shadow doorway, I glimpsed a figure, a gaunt, indistinct shape that sent my heart into overdrive. For a moment, our eyes met, and I felt an overwhelming sadness emanating from that spectral presence. It was as if the figure had been waiting for me, silently pleading for release. In that dreadful moment, I stepped forward, unable to resist the pull of a morbid curiosity. The moment I crossed the threshold into the mausoleum's dark interior, the air turned frigid, and the whispers coalesced into a single mournful cry. "At last, you have come." The sound reverberated through the chamber, echoing off ancient stone. My flashlight flickered uncertainly, as if struggling against the oppressive darkness. I reached out tentatively, half expecting to touch the cold hand of the apparition, but there was nothing, only the echo of my own heartbeat. Stumbling back into the night, I left the mausoleum with a mixture of relief and dread. Every step away from that cursed place felt like escaping from the clutches of something otherworldly. Yet, the experience had etched itself into my memory. In the following days, I found that my dreams were invaded by images of sorrowful faces and whispering voices. Even the familiar surroundings of my home, with its comforting ordinary noises, felt tainted by the memory of that night. I questioned my sanity, yet deep down I knew what I had encountered was real. In the weeks that followed, I became obsessed with uncovering the history of hollow graves. I pored over old newspaper clippings and local records, discovering hints of unsolved tragedies and mysterious deaths. The more I learned, the more I felt connected to the mournful spirit that had reached out to me. It was as if my presence had awakened a long-dormant sorrow, and that sorrow, in turn, had recognized me as someone who could never truly leave its grip. The idea both terrified and fascinated me in equal measure. Even now, months later, I am tormented by that fateful encounter. The voices have not ceased. They linger at the edge of my consciousness, a constant reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved. I still take reluctant walks past hollow graves, and each time I feel a prickling sensation on my neck, as if invisible eyes were watching. I have come to accept that some spirits are eternally bound to the places of their sorrow, and perhaps to those who inadvertently stumble upon their lament. I am haunted, not by a ghost, but by the echo of their despair, and I wonder if my soul will ever find peace, never forgotten. My name is Daniel, and I never thought that working as a gravedigger could be one of the most unnerving experiences of my life. Fresh out of a dead-end job, I accepted a position at Ravenwood Cemetery, a sprawling old burial ground on the edge of town with a reputation for being quiet and unassuming. I assumed the work would be straightforward, but from my very first night on the job, I sensed that something was terribly amiss. At first, the routine was mundane, digging shallow graves in the soft earth, maintaining the old headstones, and dealing with the weight of history in silence. The cemetery's paths were lined with ancient oaks, their gnarled branches stretching over worn markers, as if to hide secrets behind their twisted limbs. On my first evening, as I shoveled dirt under a fading moon, I heard what I can only describe as a low, almost imperceptible murmur. A sound that blended with the rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. I told myself it was just the wind, but a chill crawled up my spine that night. In the following days, small, unsettling details began to accumulate. I noticed that some of the graves I dug were not entirely undisturbed. Dirt would be uneven, as if someone or something had been there moments before I arrived. I once found a headstone slightly askew, though I was certain it had stood perfectly aligned the day before. There was an odd feeling that the cemetery was watching me, its silence laden with unspoken words. At times, while I was alone with my thoughts and the rhythmic clink of my shovel, I could have sworn I heard a soft sigh, like the exhalation of someone long dead. I dismissed these occurrences as tricks of the mind, the result of fatigue and isolation. One rainy night, when the air was heavy and the sky a blanket of oppressive gray, I was assigned to a remote section of Ravenwood. The graves there were older, the markers crumbling, and the earth seemed thicker, almost resentful of being disturbed. As I dug into one particularly stubborn mound, my shovel struck something hard, a small, rusted tin box. I hesitated before prying it open, half expecting to find mementos of a past life. Instead, I discovered a faded photograph of a young woman and a note scrawled in hurried handwriting. "They never rest." My heart pounded, and a sense of dread overcame me. Who was she? And what did the note mean by "they never rest"? That question tormented me for nights afterward. I began to notice strange occurrences that defied logic. I would catch glimpses of a shadowy figure in the distance, always near the ancient mausoleums. At the end of my shift, when I believed I was alone, I sometimes heard soft footsteps following me along the narrow paths. The air would grow inexplicably cold, and the faint sound of a lullaby would drift through the trees, a tune I couldn't place, but which filled me with a deep, inescapable melancholy. Then came the night that shattered any remnants of my skepticism. It was just past midnight, and a thick mist had rolled into the cemetery. I was finishing up near a neglected grave when I heard a distinct scraping sound coming from the ground behind me. Slowly, I turned and saw, with a mixture of terror and disbelief, a pale hand emerging from a freshly dug grave. Frozen in shock, I watched as the hand gripped the earth, drawing forth the body of a man whose face was contorted in agony. The man's eyes met mine for a brief, heart-stopping moment before his form crumpled back into the earth as if he had never been there at all. I I stumbled back, my mind racing, struggling to comprehend what I had witnessed. Had I imagined it? Or was it the living reminder of the note's haunting message? The cemetery, which had always felt like a repository for the dead, now seemed to hold a dreadful secret. I hurriedly left. The images of that desperate hand burned into my memory. In the aftermath, I found myself unable to shake the oppressive weight of that night. I quit my job the following week, unable to return to a place that had shown me such a macabre truth. Even now, I hesitate to speak of what I experienced, fearing that acknowledging it might give it power. I've tried to rationalize the incident, a trick of my tired mind, perhaps. But deep down, I know there is something at Ravenwood that defies natural explanation. I still receive nightmares of crawling hands and fleeting figures, and sometimes in the dead silence of night, I swear I can hear faint scraping sounds echoing in the distance. The gravedigger's secret, as I've come to call it, remains locked within the cemetery's dark history, a secret that refuses to be buried. Whether it was a one-time hallucination or the beginning of something far more sinister, I cannot say. All I know is that I carry that night with me, a reminder that the dead may never truly rest. My name is Michael, and I've always had a penchant for adrenaline-fueled adventures. One chilly autumn evening, a few friends and I decided to test our nerve by spending the night in what locals ominously refer to as the Boneyard, a long-forgotten cemetery on the outskirts of town. It was said to be cursed, but the idea only added to the thrill. We arrived just as dusk settled over the barren landscape. The cemetery was unremarkable, a patch of weathered gravestones, moss-covered monuments, and skeletal trees reaching out like gnarled hands. The setting, while eerie, felt entirely ordinary to me. Yet, as the last rays of sunlight faded, a peculiar sense of foreboding crept in. I recall feeling as if the night itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. After setting up a makeshift camp near an ancient mausoleum, we began to share ghost stories and urban legends. Laughter and bravado filled the air, masking the underlying tension we all felt. However, as the hours wore on, small, unsettling details began to erode our confidence. I was the first to notice the faint sound of footsteps that didn't match our own, echoing softly between the tombstones. At first, I assumed it was one of my friends playing a prank, but when no one admitted to it, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. As midnight approached, the atmosphere grew palpably heavy. I wandered away from the group for a moment, drawn by an inexplicable impulse. That's when I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of a neglected grave. It was nothing more than a silhouette, almost merging with the darkness, yet it sent a shiver down my spine. I hesitated, questioning whether my eyes were playing tricks on me. When I returned to my friends, they too mentioned hearing whispers, soft, almost imperceptible murmurs that seemed to call out our names. The turning point came just after midnight. We had gathered around a flickering lantern when a cold wind swept through the cemetery, extinguishing our light and plunging us into near-total darkness. Panic set in as our whispered jokes turned to frantic calls. In the midst of the chaos, I distinctly heard the sound of stones scraping against stone, as if someone, or something, was dragging a heavy object across the ground. The noise reverberated through the stillness of the night, amplifying our terror. In the ensuing moments, as we fumbled for our phones to light our way, the figure I had seen earlier reappeared. Now it was closer. A gaunt, almost skeletal outline that seemed to drift without purpose. It moved slowly, deliberately, as though beckoning us deeper into the cemetery. The dead, it seemed, wanted us to stay. In a split second of horrifying clarity, I realized that the legends were more than mere stories. The restless souls of the Boneyard were not content to be ignored. Our group fractured in that moment. Some tried to run toward the exit, while others, gripped by a paralyzing mix of terror and morbid curiosity, followed the figure. I froze, caught between the urge to flee and the inexplicable compulsion to understand what was happening. The figure's gaze, if it could be called that, felt accusatory, as though it were condemning our intrusion. And then, as abruptly as it had appeared, the figure vanished, leaving us in an oppressive silence punctuated only by our ragged breathing and the echo of distant, spectral murmurs. I eventually rejoined the few who managed to escape that night, my mind reeling with questions. What had we truly witnessed? The remaining survivors could offer no answers, only haunted looks and brief, trembling silences. I still wonder if our intrusion had disturbed something that should have remained undisturbed, a secret yearning for eternal company. In the days since that fateful night, I have tried to convince myself it was a shared hallucination, a trick of the mind born from fear. Yet, every time I pass a cemetery, I feel a chill and a strange pull, as if the dead remember us. The boneyard's mystery remains unresolved, a lingering whisper in the dark that leaves me questioning whether some legends are best left unprobed.